My name is Beverly, I'm 28 years old, and last Christmas Eve, I stood shivering in the snow outside my childhood home while my mother screamed that I was a disgrace to the family. My belongings lay scattered across the frozen lawn like trash. All because I refused to marry Richard Sterling, the 45-year-old man they'd sold me to for $50,000. As I bent down to gather my things, a woman approached through the snow. She wore a designer coat worth more than my car, but her feet were completely bare, leaving bloody footprints in the white powder. She smiled at me with the warmest eyes I'd ever seen and asked if I needed help. That barefoot stranger would change absolutely everything. Before we continue this incredible story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you spending time with family this holiday season, or are you finding your own path like I did? Please hit that like button if you believe in choosing your own destiny, and subscribe so you won't miss what happens when family betrayal meets unexpected kindness. Trust me, what comes next will leave you speechless. The whole nightmare started 3 weeks before Christmas when my parents, Joyce and Frank Henderson, invited me over for what they called an important family dinner. I should have known something was wrong when Mom used the good china and Dad wasn't watching sports. My 5-year-old daughter Emma played in the living room while they presented their proposal like a business transaction. Richard Sterling, a supposed successful businessman, had approached them about marrying me. The catch? He'd already given them $50,000 as a bride price, and they'd already spent every penny on my younger sister Melissa's upcoming wedding to her boyfriend Jake. Mom's exact words still echo in my mind, "Beverly, you're 28 with a bastard child. No decent man will want you. Richard is your only chance at respectability." When I asked how they could make such a decision without even consulting me, Dad slammed his fist on the table and said daughters owed their parents obedience, especially daughters who'd already brought shame to the family by having children out of wedlock. Emma's father had abandoned us when she was 6 months old, disappeared without a trace or a penny of support, and somehow in my parents' minds, that made me damaged goods to be sold to the highest bidder. I discovered the true depth of their betrayal when Melissa walked in wearing a $10,000 wedding dress. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed as she twirled around, showing off what my bride price had bought. "I helped arrange everything," she said with a smirk. "Richard saw your photo at Mom's birthday party and asked about you. I told him you were desperate for a father figure for Emma." The room spun as I processed her words. My own sister had marketed me like livestock. Mom chimed in that Richard was expecting a grateful, compliant wife, not an ungrateful brat who didn't appreciate when successful men showed interest. I stood up, took Emma's hand, and told them I would never marry a man who thought he could buy me. That's when Dad grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. "You'll marry him, or you'll get out of this house tonight. You've disgraced us enough. First getting pregnant by that loser who left you, now refusing a good man's proposal. What kind of mother denies her child a stable home?" I wrenched free and said the kind who teaches her daughter that women aren't property to be sold. The explosion that followed was unlike anything I'd experienced in 28 years of disappointing them. Mom started throwing my belongings out the front door while screaming that I was an ungrateful witch who didn't deserve their love. Dad went to Emma's pile of wrapped Christmas presents under their tree and threw every single one in the kitchen trash, telling her that bad girls whose mommies didn't listen didn't get presents from Santa. My baby girl started crying, asking what she did wrong, and that's when something inside me snapped. I picked her up, grabbed my purse, and headed for the door. Melissa blocked my path to hand me a piece of paper with Richard's phone number. "He's expecting your call by tomorrow to apologize and accept his proposal. He's already told everyone at his country club about his upcoming wedding. Don't embarrass him or us further." I crumpled the paper and threw it at her feet. Outside, the neighbors had gathered to watch the Henderson family drama unfold. Not one of them offered to help as I tried to gather my things from the snow-covered lawn with Emma clinging to my neck, still crying about her presence. That's when I saw her. The barefoot woman. She walked down the sidewalk like the ice beneath her feet was a warm beach. Her coat probably cost $5,000, and diamond earrings caught the glow from the streetlights, but those bare feet left bloody prints in the snow. She stopped right in front of me and said the words that would echo in my mind for months to come. Sometimes we need to lose everything to find out who really loves us. Can I help you carry these things to your car? I was too shocked to refuse as this elegant stranger began picking up my belongings, her manicured hands gathering my cheap clothes from the frozen ground. She introduced herself simply as Diane and mentioned she was out for her nightly walk. Something in her eyes told me this was no coincidence, but I was too overwhelmed to question it. She helped me load everything into my beat-up Honda while Emma finally stopped crying, fascinated by this lady who walked barefoot in winter. As Diane closed my trunk, she handed me $100 bill. "For a warm room tonight," she said. "No child should sleep in a car on Christmas Eve." Before I could refuse or even thank her properly, she was walking away, leaving those bloody footprints like a trail of breadcrumbs in a fairy tale. I used Diane's money to get Emma and me a room at the cheapest motel I could find, stretching my meager savings as far as possible. The Sleepy Inn wasn't much, but it had heat and a bed, which was more than my parents had left us with. Emma fell asleep clutching her favorite stuffed elephant, the one thing I'd managed to grab before Mom threw us out. I stayed awake planning our next moves. I had about $800 saved, my job at the dental office paid decent wages, and my apartment was paid up through the end of the month. We could make it through this. Or so I thought. The next morning, I tried to check my bank balance at the motel's ancient ATM and my card was declined. The screen showed a zero balance. My hands shook as I called the bank, only to discover my parents had drained every penny. They were still co-signers from when I'd opened the account at 16, something I'd never bothered to change because I'd never imagined they'd steal from their own daughter. The bank representative said the withdrawal was legal since they had signing authority. "Your parents said it was a family emergency," she explained, as if that made it acceptable. Before I could process this theft, someone knocked on our motel room door. I opened it to find Richard Sterling himself, flanked by a man in an expensive suit who could only be his lawyer. Richard looked exactly like his photos, mid-40s, graying temples, the kind of man who wore his wealth like armor. "Beverly," he said in a tone that suggested he was speaking to a misbehaving child. "Your parents told me you were confused last night. I'm here to clear things up." He pushed past me into the room while his lawyer remained in the doorway. Emma woke up and immediately shrank against the headboard, instinctively recognizing a threat. Richard glanced at her with the appraising look someone might give a used car. "She's small for 5. We'll need to work on that. My future children need to be strong." I positioned myself between him and Emma, telling him to leave. That's when his lawyer stepped forward with a folder. "Miss Henderson, or should I say soon-to-be Mrs. Sterling, you've signed a marriage contract. The advance has been paid and spent. You're legally obligated to fulfill your end of the bargain." My blood ran cold as he produced a document with my signature, except I'd never seen it before in my life. The signature was close but not quite right, the way someone might sign if they'd practiced copying but didn't know my little quirks. My parents or Melissa had forged it. "This is fraud," I said. "I never signed this." Richard's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Prove it. Your parents witnessed it. Your sister notarized it. Who do you think a judge will believe? A desperate single mother who's about to be homeless, or respectable members of the community?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages he claimed were from me, all sent from a number I didn't recognize, full of desperate pleas for him to marry me and save me from poverty. "I have enough evidence here to show you've been pursuing me for months. If you don't honor our agreement, I'll have no choice but to file for breach of promise. I'll also have to inform child services about your unstable behavior, throwing away your daughter's security over some feminist pride." As if on cue, his phone rang. He answered with a smirk, then handed it to me. It was my boss, Dr. Patterson, informing me I was fired effective immediately due to multiple complaints about my unprofessional behavior and theft of office supplies. I hadn't stolen so much as a paperclip in 3 years of employment, but Richard's reach was already destroying my life. Within an hour of Richard leaving with promises to return tomorrow for my answer, child services showed up. The social worker, a tired-looking woman named Ms. Crawford, said they'd received multiple reports of child neglect and unstable behavior. She questioned Emma about whether Mommy had been acting strange, whether she'd eaten properly, whether anyone had hurt her. My baby tried her best to answer, but she was scared and confused. I showed Ms. Crawford our motel receipt, proving we had shelter. I explained about my parents throwing us out, but she'd already been poisoned against me. "Ma'am, I have reports from your parents, your sister, and a concerned citizen named Mr. Sterling all stating you're having some kind of breakdown. They say you're refusing to provide stable housing for your daughter out of spite." She told me to find permanent housing within 48 hours or risk losing Emma to emergency foster care. As she left, she mentioned that Mr. Sterling had graciously offered to provide a character reference if I showed responsibility by accepting his help. The nightmare deepened when I returned to my apartment to gather our things, only to find the locks changed. My landlord, Bob Morrison, stood there with 2 police officers. He was Dad's poker buddy, and the apologetic look he gave me was meaningless. "Your parents explained the situation, Beverly. Can't have unstable tenants endangering other residents. I've already disposed of your belongings per the abandonment clause." "You haven't abandoned anything, we'd been gone less than 36 hours, but one of the officers was Tim Bradley, Richard's golf partner. He suggested I move along unless I wanted to be arrested for trespassing. Everything we owned except what was in my car was gone. Emma's toys, her clothes, our photo albums, my work clothes, all of it thrown away or stolen by my sister, who I later saw wearing my only good dress on Instagram. I sat in my car in that parking lot, Emma asking when we could go home, when I spotted a familiar figure. Diane stood across the street, watching. This time she wore shoes, expensive heels that clicked as she crossed to my car. She didn't say anything at first, just observed. Then she pulled out a business card. "I run a company. We're always looking for dedicated employees. The pay is good, and we offer emergency housing assistance for new hires." I stared at the card reading Chin Technologies, a name even I recognized as one of the biggest tech firms in the state. Pride made me want to refuse what felt like charity, but Emma's future mattered more than my ego. I tucked the card in my pocket and thanked her. Diane studied me for a long moment. "Pride is expensive when you have a child to feed. But I respect your desire to earn your way. The offer stands when you're ready." She walked away again, and I noticed she was limping slightly. Those bloody footprints from last night hadn't been for show. This billionaire had genuinely walked barefoot in the snow to help a stranger. That evening, I called my best friend Carol for help. We'd known each other since high school, and she'd been Emma's godmother at her baptism. She invited us over immediately, hugging me tight when we arrived at her suburban home. Over hot chocolate, I poured out everything that had happened. Carol listened with appropriate gasps and sympathetic noises, holding my hand across her kitchen table. I thought I'd finally found safe harbor in this storm. How wrong I was. The next morning, I woke on Carol's couch to find her going through my phone. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. "Richard is paying me $5,000 to report on you," she said matter-of-factly. "Do you know how much that means to my family? Jim got laid off last month. I need this money." The betrayal hit harder than my parents' cruelty. This was my chosen sister, the person who'd held my hand through Emma's birth when her father vanished. She'd been recording our conversations, sending Richard updates on my plans, even taking photos of Emma and me sleeping. I left Carol's house with Emma crying, confused why Aunt Carol was being mean. We drove to my Aunt Ruth's place 2 towns over. Ruth was Dad's older sister but had always been the rebel of the family. Surely she'd help us. She welcomed us warmly, fed us a home-cooked meal, and let Emma play with her cats. Then she presented her terms. "I'll testify about your parents' abusive behavior," she said. "I'll tell the court how they've always favored Melissa, how they treat you like a servant. But I need $5,000 for my trouble." Lost wages, you understand. When I explained I had no money, she shrugged. Then I can't help you. Richard Sterling has deep pockets. Maybe you should reconsider his offer. At least Emma would have a father figure. As we left, she called after us that family was family, but business was business. I spent that night in the car with Emma, parked in a 24-hour Walmart lot. My phone rang constantly with increasingly threatening messages. Your boss Dr. Patterson called to say he was considering filing charges for the theft of dental supplies unless I returned them immediately. I'd never taken anything, but Richard's web of lies was tightening. My apartment complex sent emails about damages to the unit that would eat my entire security deposit. Neighbors I'd known for years crossed the street when they saw me, poisoned by whatever stories my family was spreading. The final blow came when Emma's preschool called. Ms. Henderson, we've received some concerning reports about your mental state. We think it's best if Emma takes a break from classes until you can provide documentation of your stability from a licensed psychiatrist. They were isolating us completely, cutting every lifeline I had. That's when things got truly sinister. Melissa started posting on social media about her concern for her poor sister's mental breakdown. She shared photos from years ago, edited to make me look unhinged. One showed me laughing at a Halloween party with red eyes from the camera flash. She captioned it evidence of substance abuse. Another from when I'd been crying after Emma's father left became unstable behavior patterns. The comments filled with people I'd known my whole life, all expressing shock at my deterioration and praising my family for trying to help me. Nobody questioned why a loving family would air such personal matters publicly. Richard controlled the narrative, and everyone believed it because he had money and my parents had respectability. I was just the unwed mother who'd already proven her poor judgment by getting pregnant outside marriage. The psychiatric evaluation my parents claimed to have was their masterpiece of deception. Mom had been taking notes for months, recording every time I was tired from working and raising Emma alone, every moment of frustration, every normal human emotion. She'd twisted them into symptoms of mental illness. Patient shows signs of exhaustion, possible depression, one line read. Expresses anger toward family members trying to help, evidence of paranoid delusions, said another. The document was signed by Dr. Marcus Webb, who turned out to be Richard's cousin and not even a psychiatrist but a general practitioner who owed Richard money. Still, it looked official enough to fool anyone who didn't dig deeper. Richard made sure to send copies to everyone in my life, my employer, Emma's school, our church, even the local food bank where I'd volunteered. The message was clear: submit or be destroyed completely. I discovered the true scope of their planning when going through old emails at the library computer, trying to find any evidence to fight back. There were messages between my parents and Richard dating back 6 months. They'd been negotiating my sale like I was a used car. Mom haggled over the price while Dad insisted on payment up front. Melissa chimed in with helpful suggestions about how to break me down psychologically. Wait until the holidays, she'd written. Beverly gets emotional about giving Emma a perfect Christmas. That's when she'll be most vulnerable. They'd choreographed every moment of this nightmare, from the family dinner to throwing me out on Christmas Eve. Richard's messages revealed he'd done this before with other women, always targeting single mothers who could be isolated from support systems. My parents knew this and didn't care. $50,000 mattered more than their daughter's safety or granddaughter's future. That night, Emma developed a fever. Stress and sleeping in the cold had weakened her immune system. I rushed her to the emergency room, where they treated her but asked pointed questions about our living situation. I lied and said we were staying with friends, but the nurse's skeptical look told me she didn't believe it. As I held Emma's hot little body in that hospital bed, I realized I was losing this war. Richard had resources I couldn't match. My family had respectability I'd never achieve as an unwed mother. Everyone who should have protected us had a price, and Richard could afford them all. For the first time since this nightmare began, I considered surrender. Maybe Emma would be better off if I just gave in. At least she'd have a warm bed and food. What kind of mother was I to let pride keep her sleeping in cars? As if sensing my despair, Emma opened her eyes and whispered, "Mommy, are we going home soon?" I kissed her forehead and lied that we'd be home soon, though I had no idea where home even was anymore. After Emma's hospital visit, Richard escalated his campaign. 3 men began following us everywhere. They didn't try to hide their presence, parking outside wherever we stopped, taking photos, making sure I knew I was being watched. When I tried to file a police report, Officer Tim Bradley took my statement with barely concealed amusement. "Ma'am, Mr. Sterling is concerned about his fiancée's well-being. These men are simply ensuring you're safe. No crime in that." The message was clear. The law wouldn't protect us. We spent the next nights moving between 24-hour locations, the library during the day, fast food restaurants in the evening, and Walmart parking lots at night. Emma stopped asking when we were going home. She'd adapted to our new reality with the heartbreaking resilience of children who have no choice. I watched her sleep across 2 chairs in McDonald's and felt my heart shatter. She deserved better than a mother who couldn't provide basic shelter. The custody papers arrived through Carol, who'd apparently become Richard's official messenger. My parents were filing for emergency custody of Emma, citing my homelessness, mental instability, and inability to provide proper care. The court date was set for December 28, 3 days after Christmas. The document painted me as a danger to my own child, someone who'd chosen homelessness over a stable marriage that would benefit Emma. They'd included statements from 23 people, all swearing I was unfit. Even our pastor, Reverend Michael Thompson, had signed a letter expressing concern about my erratic behavior and refusal to accept help. I had 3 days to find a lawyer, which was impossible with no money and no one willing to help someone fighting Richard Sterling. Every attorney I called either had conflicts of interest or quoted retainers I couldn't afford. One honestly told me I should accept whatever deal Richard offered because I couldn't win against his legal team. Melissa's final betrayal came in the form of identity theft. She'd used information from growing up together to access my credit cards and max them out. Thousands of dollars in debt appeared overnight for purchases I'd never made: jewelry, designer clothes, electronics. When I tried to report it as fraud, I learned she'd been smart. The purchases were made from IP addresses I'd used before, at times when I couldn't prove I was elsewhere. She'd even used my old passwords from when we'd shared a computer as teenagers. The credit card companies saw a desperate woman with a history of financial problems and assumed I was lying about the fraud. My credit score plummeted. Any chance of getting an apartment or loan disappeared. Richard's web had no holes, no escape routes. He'd thought of everything. My former co-workers piled on like vultures sensing weakness. Dr. Patterson's wife Sharon, who'd always resented that her husband complimented my work, spread stories about finding me going through their trash looking for food. Complete fiction, but people believed it because it fit the narrative of my desperation. Other co-workers claimed I'd stolen from them too, small things that couldn't be proven either way but painted a picture of escalating criminality. The dental board received a complaint that I'd been practicing without proper certification, potentially endangering patients. Another lie that would take months to disprove, time I didn't have. Each attack was carefully calibrated to destroy any chance of employment in my field. Even if I somehow survived Richard's assault, I'd never work in a dental office again. The illness that had been creeping up finally caught me. Pneumonia, the doctor at the free clinic said, caused by prolonged exposure to cold and stress. She prescribed antibiotics I couldn't afford and rest I couldn't take. I sat in that clinic waiting room, burning with fever, while Emma colored with broken crayons, and heard her ask another child if their mommy was sick too. The other mother pulled her child away from my daughter like poverty was contagious. Emma looked at me with those wise 5-year-old eyes and asked why everyone was being mean to us. What could I say? That Grandma and Grandpa had sold Mommy to a bad man? That Aunt Melissa thought money mattered more than family? That every adult who should protect her had failed? I told her sometimes people get confused about what's important, but we knew love mattered most. She nodded solemnly and went back to coloring, drawing a picture of two stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "Mommy and Me Going Home," she titled it. The church's rejection stung worse than the rest. I'd attended First Baptist since childhood, been baptized in that sanctuary, taught Sunday school to toddlers. But when I went seeking help from my church family, Reverend Thompson met me at the door like a bouncer. "Beverly, your parents shared their concerns. It's clear you need professional help, not enabling. We'll pray for you to find wisdom and accept the blessings God has provided through Mr. Sterling." When I tried to explain the truth, he cut me off. A good Christian woman doesn't air family disputes publicly. She certainly doesn't reject a man offering marriage and stability for her child. Think of Emma's soul, growing up in such chaos. The congregation inside pretended not to see us being turned away, though I recognized faces I'd known for decades. Mrs. Patterson, my third-grade Sunday school teacher, looked through me like I was invisible. The family that had promised to support one another in Christ abandoned us because Richard's tithe checks were more valuable than truth. That night, the darkest thought entered my mind. Maybe Emma would be better off with my parents. At least she'd have food, shelter, and education. They'd destroy her spirit like they'd tried to destroy mine, but she'd survive. Survival seemed like the best I could offer her anymore. I actually drove to their house, planning to knock on the door and surrender. But as I parked outside, I saw them through the window. They were having a dinner party, laughing with Richard and his lawyer. Mom wore new jewelry, probably bought with my bride price. Dad raised a toast to something, and everyone cheered. They weren't worried about their granddaughter sleeping in a car. They were celebrating their victory. I drove away without knocking, but the thought persisted. What kind of mother kept her child homeless out of pride? Emma deserved better, even if better meant giving her to people who'd shown they valued money over blood. Everything culminated when my parents played their cruelest card. They'd been telling Emma during supervised visits at the hospital that I wasn't her real mother. That her real mother had given her to them, and they'd let me play pretend until I proved I couldn't take care of her. "Grandma says my real mommy is coming to get me," Emma told me one night. "She says you've been lying to me." The confusion in her voice broke what remained of my heart. I showed her photos of her birth, of me holding her minutes after she was born, but the damage was done. My own child doubted our bond because the people who should have protected it were willing to destroy anything to win. I held her while she cried, promising her I was her real mommy and always would be. But how much longer could I keep that promise? The court date loomed, and I had nothing. No lawyer, no home, no witnesses willing to testify for me. Just my word against dozens of others. In desperation, I called the business card Diane had given me. A cheerful receptionist answered, "Chin Technologies, how may I direct your call?" I started to speak, then hung up. What was I thinking? This billionaire had probably forgotten about the pathetic woman she'd found in the snow. The card was likely just rich person charity, making themselves feel good by offering help they never expected anyone to actually request. But as I sat in that Walmart parking lot, Emma asleep in her car seat, burning with fever myself, I realized I had nothing left to lose. Pride was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. I called back and asked for Diane Chen. The receptionist said Ms. Chen was in a meeting but would return my call. Yeah, right, I thought. Billionaires don't return calls from homeless women. But 20 minutes later, my phone rang from a blocked number. "Beverly?" Diane's voice was warm, concerned. "I've been wondering when you'd call. Are you ready to accept help now?" I broke down crying, unable to speak. She waited patiently until I managed to explain how much worse things had gotten. When I finished, she said 7 words that changed everything: "I'll send a car. We need to talk." The car Diane sent wasn't a typical corporate vehicle but a modest SUV with tinted windows. The driver, an older woman named Grace, helped transfer our meager belongings while Emma stared in wonder at the leather seats and working heater. Grace drove us not to Chin Technologies' famous downtown tower but to a modest office building in the suburbs. This is Ms. Chen's private office, Grace explained. She prefers to handle personal matters away from corporate scrutiny. Inside, Diane waited in a conference room that felt more like a living room, complete with soft couches and children's toys. Emma immediately gravitated toward a dollhouse while I sat across from the woman who'd walked barefoot in the snow. Diane had swapped her designer coat for a simple sweater and jeans, but her feet were bandaged. A reminder, she said, noticing my glance, that comfort can make us forget others' pain. She listened without interrupting as I recounted everything since we'd met. When I finished, she pulled out a thick folder. "I've been watching," she admitted. "Not just you, but everyone involved. My team has documented every lie, every forged document, every bribe. Did you know Richard Sterling has done this to 3 other women? 1 in Nevada, 2 in Oregon. Same pattern, target single mothers, isolate them, force them into marriage or destroy them trying. The difference is he's never encountered someone with your strength before. Most surrender within days. You've lasted weeks." I stared at the evidence she'd gathered, photos of Richard meeting with my parents months ago, bank records showing the $50,000 transfer, even recordings of Melissa bragging about her part in the scheme. "Why didn't you help sooner?" I asked. Diane's expression grew sad. "Because I needed to know who you really were. Money attracts users and liars. I had to see if you'd sell your integrity when things got impossible. You never did." She revealed the truth about that night we met. "I wasn't randomly walking your parents' street barefoot. I was there because I'd heard whispers about Richard's newest target. You see, 20 years ago, my daughter faced something similar. A wealthy man decided he wanted her, and her family was too poor to fight back. She didn't survive the marriage." Diane's voice cracked slightly. "She lasted 6 months before taking her own life. I was building my company then, too focused on success to see her pain. I promised at her grave that I'd use my wealth to prevent other women from suffering her fate. When I heard about Richard targeting another single mother, I had to act. But I needed to approach carefully. Predators like him have lawyers and connections. I couldn't just throw money at the problem. I needed ammunition, and more importantly, I needed to know if you were strong enough to survive the fight ahead." "You're offering me a job?" I asked, still processing. Diane smiled. "I'm offering you an army. First, meet your lawyer." The door opened and a man entered who radiated authority. Marcus Webb didn't look like a typical attorney. 6'4", built like a linebacker, with silver hair and eyes that promised destruction to anyone who crossed him. "Ms. Henderson," he said, shaking my hand. "I've reviewed your case. Your family and Mr. Sterling have made 3 critical errors. First, the forged signature on that marriage contract is laughably amateur. Second, they've left a digital trail of conspiracy that a first-year law student could follow. Third, they've underestimated me. I don't lose, especially when children are involved." He spread documents across the table with surgical precision. "By tomorrow morning, I'll have filed 12 separate legal actions. Criminal fraud charges against Mr. Sterling. Identity theft charges against your sister. Conspiracy and child endangerment charges against your parents. We're also suing for damages, emotional distress, lost wages, defamation. By the time I'm done, they'll be begging to settle." "But the custody hearing is in 3 days, I protested. Marcus smiled like a shark. "About that. Judge Harrison owes me several favors. He'll be very interested to learn that Richard Sterling has been judge shopping to find someone corrupt enough to rubber stamp this travesty. The emergency custody petition will be dismissed with prejudice by noon tomorrow. Your parents will be lucky if they ever see Emma again without supervision. As for Mr. Sterling's 3 previous victims, they've all agreed to testify. Seems they've been waiting for someone with resources to help them seek justice. Diane has considerable resources." He pulled out his phone and showed me a news article already being prepared. "Local businessman accused of marriage fraud scheme. The journalist at Channel 7 is expecting my call in an hour. By evening news, Richard Sterling will be famous for all the wrong reasons. Your story goes public tonight, with your permission. Sunlight is the best disinfectant for corruption. Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching a teddy bear from the toy box. Diane covered her with a blanket before turning back to me. Beverly, I need complete honesty. Are you prepared for this fight? They'll get vicious when cornered. Everything you've experienced so far will seem gentle compared to what's coming. But you won't be alone this time. I have resources Richard can't match and connections he can't buy. More importantly, I have something he lacks, genuine purpose. This isn't about money or control for me. It's about justice. Justice for my daughter, for his previous victims, and for you and Emma. But you have to want it too. You have to be willing to stand up in court and tell your truth, no matter how much it hurts or who it exposes. Can you do that? I looked at my daughter sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. Emma deserved a mother who fought for her, not one who surrendered to bullies. Yes, I said. I'm ready. Good, Diane replied. Then let's discuss your actual job. I do need a head of community outreach, someone who understands what it's like to be powerless against systems designed to protect the powerful. But that comes later. First, we destroy everyone who tried to destroy you. She handed me a company credit card. Unlimited funds for anything you need, housing, food, medical care, clothes. Don't argue about charity. Consider it a signing bonus for the fight ahead. Grace will take you to a furnished apartment we maintain for employees in transition. It's safe, secure, and already stocked with everything a 5-year-old might need. Tomorrow, Marcus files our papers. Tonight, you rest and remember what it feels like to be safe. As we prepared to leave, I asked the question that had bothered me all night. Why do you walk barefoot in the snow? Diane laughed, the first genuine joy I'd heard from her. Because comfort is dangerous for people like us who've known real pain. The bare feet remind me that I have the power to choose discomfort, unlike those forced into it. Plus, she winked, it certainly makes people remember me. A billionaire who ruins her feet to help others tends to stick in memory. Speaking of which, how are you feeling? I'd forgotten my own pneumonia in the rush of events. Diane called her personal physician to meet us at the apartment. You're no good to Emma's sick. Warriors need strength for battle, and tomorrow, we go to war. The next morning, Richard Sterling woke to find his world collapsing. Marcus Webb had worked through the night, filing charges in multiple jurisdictions. The news story broke on 3 channels simultaneously, complete with interviews from Richard's previous victims. Jane from Nevada told how he'd drugged and assaulted her before she escaped. Maria from Oregon detailed how he'd had her committed to a psychiatric facility when she tried to leave. Sarah, also from Oregon, revealed he'd stolen her daughter and hidden the child with relatives until she signed away her parental rights. Each woman had evidence, photos, documents, recordings Richard thought were destroyed. Diane's investigators had spent months gathering ammunition, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment was now, with me as the catalyst that brought his empire down. My parents' house was served with warrants at 6 in the morning. Police seized computers, phones, financial records. The $50,000 was traced through multiple accounts, all leading back to Richard's illegal activities. He'd been laundering money through bride prices, using desperate families as unwitting accomplices. My parents weren't just cruel, they were criminals who'd sold their daughter to a predator for dirty money. Mom's Facebook livestream begging for understanding went viral for all the wrong reasons. She claimed they were trying to help me find stability, but commenters who'd seen the news weren't buying it. The carefully constructed image of a respectable family crumbled in hours. Dad tried damage control by calling Richard's lawyer, only to discover Richard had bigger problems than our family drama. The emergency custody hearing became a massacre. Judge Harrison, freed from whatever pressure Richard had applied, listened to Marcus present evidence for 2 hours. The forged marriage contract was examined by a handwriting expert who confirmed it was fake. The psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Webb was revealed as fraud when it emerged he'd lost his license 3 years ago for similar schemes. Melissa's social media posts were presented as evidence of conspiracy to defame. The judge's expression grew darker with each revelation. When my parents' lawyer tried to argue I was still an unfit mother, Judge Harrison cut him off. "Counselor, your clients are lucky they're not in handcuffs right now. They conspired to sell their daughter to a known predator, stole her money, destroyed her belongings, and attempted to steal her child. If I could jail them from this bench, I would. The emergency petition is dismissed with extreme prejudice. Furthermore, I'm granting Ms. Henderson an immediate restraining order against all parties involved. They come within 500 feet of her or the child, they go to jail." Richard's arrest happened during his morning golf game. Channel 7 had cameras rolling as FBI agents led him away in handcuffs while his country club buddies watched in shock. The charges were federal: racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud across state lines. His previous victims had provided enough evidence to ensure he'd never see freedom again. His assets were frozen pending investigation, including the money he'd given my parents. Melissa discovered this when she tried to pay for her wedding venue, and her payment bounced. The vendor, having seen the news, publicly announced they were canceling her event and keeping the deposit due to the contract's morality clause. Her dream wedding, bought with my suffering, evaporated in an afternoon. Her fiancé Jake, learning the truth about where the money came from, ended their engagement via text message and moved back with his parents. Poetic justice for someone who'd helped destroy her sister for a party. Carol's comeuppance arrived in the form of her own husband. Jim had found the $5,000 and wondered where it came from. When he learned his wife had sold out her best friend for money, he was disgusted. He packed up their children and moved to his mother's house, filing for divorce and citing moral bankruptcy. Carol tried calling me, leaving tearful voicemails about how sorry she was, how she'd had no choice. But choices were all we really had in life, and she'd made hers. The court of public opinion judged her harshly. Her employer, a Christian daycare center, fired her for demonstrating values incompatible with their mission. The $5,000 she'd earned by betraying Emma and me wouldn't last long against lawyer fees and unemployment. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall, just sadness that money had meant more than 17 years of friendship. The investigation revealed more victims and more accomplices. Dr. Patterson hadn't just fired me on Richard's orders, he'd been receiving kickbacks for referring vulnerable women to Richard's attention. 3 other dental assistants came forward with stories of how they'd been targeted and fired when they refused advances. The dental board suspended his license pending investigation. His wife Sharon, who'd spread lies about me, found herself ostracized when people realized she'd known about her husband's activities. Their perfect suburban life imploded as patients canceled appointments and staff quit in protest. Even Reverend Thompson faced consequences when congregation members demanded answers about his role in turning away a desperate mother on Christmas Eve. The church board launched an investigation that uncovered he'd been taking bribes from Richard to identify vulnerable women in the congregation. His resignation came within a week, along with tearful admissions about losing his way. Through it all, Diane's support never wavered. She assigned a security team to protect Emma and me, not from physical threats but from media intrusion. Our story had captured national attention as an example of systematic predation hidden behind respectability. Interview requests poured in, but Diane advised patience. "Let the legal system work first," she counseled. "Your story will have more power when Richard is convicted, not just accused." She was right. As witnesses testified and evidence mounted, public opinion shifted completely. The hometown that had shunned me now claimed they'd always known something was wrong with Richard Sterling. The same neighbors who'd watched my parents throw me out suddenly remembered how concerned they'd been. Historical revision at its finest, but I didn't care about their approval anymore. I had something better: truth and justice. Emma thrived in our new stability. The apartment Diane provided was modest but safe, with a real bedroom for my daughter and a small Christmas tree we decorated together. She attended a new school where no one knew our story, making friends who liked her for herself. The therapist Diane recommended helped her process the confusion about what Grandma had said about real mothers. Children are resilient, Dr. Martinez explained, but they need consistency and truth. Emma knows you're her mother. She just needs reassurance that truth isn't changing. We spent hours looking through baby photos, with Emma asking questions about her birth and early years. The conspiracy to steal her memories failed because our bond was stronger than their lies. Every night, she fell asleep knowing she was loved, safe, and home. The trials began in March. Richard faced federal charges while my parents and Melissa dealt with state prosecution. I testified for 3 days, detailing every moment of harassment and conspiracy. Marcus Webb had prepared me well, teaching me to speak clearly and stick to facts. The defense tried to paint me as an unreliable witness, but the evidence supported every claim. When Richard's lawyer suggested I'd let his client on, Marcus objected so forcefully the judge warned him about decorum. But the jury saw through the victim-blaming tactics. Richard's previous victims testified via video link, their stories eerily similar to mine. A pattern of predation emerged that no amount of expensive legal maneuvering could hide. When the guilty verdict came down, Richard received 25 years in federal prison. He'd die behind bars, never able to hurt another woman or child again. My parents' trial was harder to watch. They looked older, smaller, diminished by their fall from grace. Mom cried through most of it, though I suspected the tears were for her lost reputation rather than remorse. Dad maintained his stern expression until the prosecutor played recordings of him negotiating my bride price like I was livestock. The jury saw him for what he was. A man who'd sell his daughter to maintain his comfortable life. They received 5 years each for conspiracy and theft. Melissa got 3 years probation and mandatory community service. The judge called their actions a betrayal of the sacred trust between parent and child. I felt no joy watching them led away in handcuffs, just relief that Emma and I were finally safe from their greed and cruelty. 1 year later, I stood before an audience of 200 women at the Chin Foundation's annual conference for survivors of family betrayal. The woman at the podium bore little resemblance to the one who'd stood in the snow clutching her belongings. I wore a professional suit bought with my own earnings as head of community outreach. My hair was styled, my pneumonia long-healed, my confidence genuine rather than forced. Emma sat in the front row with Diane, whom she now called Aunt Dee, wearing her favorite purple dress and waving enthusiastically. I began my speech with the words I'd practiced 100 times, "My name is Beverly, and I survived being sold by my family." But more importantly, I discovered that the family we choose can be stronger than blood. The foundation we'd created in the wake of my story had helped 50 women escape similar situations. We provided emergency housing, legal assistance, and job training. Every woman who walked through our doors reminded me of that desperate night when I thought surrender was the only option. Now I could offer what I needed most, belief and practical help. Diane had taught me that charity without dignity was just another form of control. We didn't just give handouts, we gave hand-ups. Women left our program with jobs, apartments, and most importantly, the knowledge that they'd earned their fresh start. The system that had trapped me became the blueprint for helping others escape. Richard's money, seized by the government, funded scholarships for single mothers. My parents' house, foreclosed and sold, became a transition home for women fleeing family abuse. My parents were released after serving 2 years with good behavior. They lived in a small apartment on the other side of town, working minimum wage jobs and keeping their heads down. Mom stocked shelves at a grocery store where she'd once shopped with her nose in the air. Dad worked as a janitor at the country club that had revoked his membership. They'd written letters through their lawyer asking for forgiveness, but I hadn't responded. Forgiveness didn't mean accepting abuse or pretending it hadn't happened. It meant releasing the anger that could poison my future. I'd forgiven them for my sake, not theirs. Emma didn't know them as grandparents, and I intended to keep it that way. Some bridges, once burned, protected us from those who'd light matches again given the chance. Melissa's life had taken its own journey. After Jake left her, she'd spiraled briefly before hitting bottom. Working as a cashier at a big box store, she'd encountered one of Richard's previous victims who recognized her from the trial coverage. Instead of confronting her with anger, Jane had offered unexpected grace. "I was desperate once too," Jane told her. "I did things I'm not proud of to survive. The difference is learning from it." That encounter sparked something in Melissa. She began attending therapy, working through the family dynamics that had made her value money over relationships. She sent apology letters monthly, each one showing more genuine understanding of her actions. "I didn't respond, but I didn't throw them away either. Maybe someday, when Emma was older, we'd discuss the aunt who'd learned too late that some prices were too high to pay." Richard died in prison during his 3rd year, beaten by inmates who discovered his history with women and children. I felt no satisfaction in his violent end, just closure. The monster who'd terrorized multiple families was gone forever. His estate, what remained after legal settlements, went to his victims. I donated my portion to the foundation, blood money transformed into hope for others. Carol had reached out several times, begging for reconciliation. She'd lost everything: her marriage, her children's respect, her job, her reputation. Part of me pitied her, but trust once shattered couldn't be glued back together. Emma sometimes asked about Aunt Carol, and I told her age-appropriate truth: sometimes people we love make choices that mean we can't be close anymore. It's sad, but it protects us from being hurt again. The speech continued as I shared the practical lessons learned. Family isn't just DNA, I told the audience. It's the people who stand by you when standing is dangerous. It's the stranger who walks barefoot in snow to help someone in need. It's the lawyer who works through the night because justice matters more than billable hours. It's the doctor who treats your sick child without judgment. It's every person who chooses to help rather than harm. The audience nodded, many wiping tears. These women knew the pain of family betrayal, the confusion of being attacked by those who should protect you. But they also knew the power of surviving, of building new families from the ashes of old ones. We were phoenixes, all of us, risen from the flames of others' greed and cruelty. Life had settled into a rhythm I'd never imagined possible during those desperate weeks. Emma attended a good school where she excelled in art and reading. Our apartment had become a real home, with her drawings covering the refrigerator and toys scattered in organized chaos. We had routine: breakfast together, school drop-off, work, dinner, homework, bedtime stories. Simple things that felt miraculous after sleeping in cars. Diane visited weekly, always barefoot in our home despite my protests about comfort. She'd become the grandmother Emma deserved, teaching her about business and charity in equal measure. Their latest project involved designing shoes for homeless people, combining Emma's creativity with Diane's resources. My daughter was learning that wealth meant nothing without willingness to help others. I'd met someone, though I'd been cautious about dating after everything. Dr. Thomas Martinez had been Emma's therapist first, helping her process the trauma. We'd developed friendship during parent sessions, bonding over single parenthood. He had a son from a previous marriage. After Emma successfully completed therapy, we'd waited 6 months before our first official date. He understood my hesitation, my need to protect Emma and myself from anyone who might hurt us. Thomas proved his worth through patience and consistency. He never pushed, never demanded, never acted entitled to our lives. When he proposed a year later, he asked Emma's permission first. She'd given enthusiastic approval along with a list of requirements for her new daddy, including mandatory tea parties and help with homework. He'd agreed to every term with the seriousness such negotiations deserved. The conference speech neared its end as I looked out at faces filled with hope despite their pain. "Remember this," I said. "When family betrays you, it's not your failure. It's theirs. You don't owe loyalty to those who sell it. You don't owe forgiveness to those who don't seek it genuinely. You don't owe access to those who've proven dangerous. What you owe is to yourself and your children, safety, dignity, and the chance to build something better. The family you choose can heal wounds the family you're born into created. Don't let anyone tell you that blood is thicker than water. The full quote is, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb." The bonds we choose are stronger than those forced upon us. As I concluded, Emma ran on stage and hugged me tight. "We have a real family now, Mommy," she whispered, echoing words from a year ago. "Yes, baby, we do," I replied, looking at Diane's proud face, Thomas's supportive smile, and the room full of survivors becoming thrivers. We'd built our family from scratch, choosing each member carefully. No one could sell us or steal from us or betray us again because we knew our worth now. The Barefoot Billionaire who'd changed everything stood and began the standing ovation. 200 women rose with her, applauding not just my story but their own survival. We were warriors in business suits and healing hearts, proof that sometimes losing everything toxic was the only way to find everything real. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. If my story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that survival is possible. Have you ever had to choose between family and your own well-being? What would you do if the people meant to protect you became your greatest threat? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like this video if it touched your heart, and subscribe for more stories of triumph over betrayal. Share this with anyone struggling with family dynamics that hurt rather than heal. Your support helps us reach more people who need to know they're not alone. Until next time, remember that you deserve love that doesn't come with a price tag.